Hello, and welcome to Leashing Bar Guests at a rather unusual time of the day, but there you go. It's been one of those days. I am, of course, Fishy, and this is still Monday, so Mappa Monday. It's been one of those days. Since this channel is about gaming and also about mental health, I'm going to say why it's been one of those days. Both reasons it's been one of those days. The second reason is to do with the mapping. I'll get onto that in a moment. But the first reason is I went through one of those moments this afternoon where I flipped into that, why the hell am I streaming telling people about role-playing games? What do I know about role-playing games? You know, I'm so out of touch. I have nothing to do with the hobby as it stands now. I tend to flip between that mode and I have 40 years of experience playing and running and designing role-playing games. I must have something to say to people. And I kind of flip back and forth between the two. And every now and then I will drop into that down mode where I just look at, you know, what's on D&D YouTube and social media and actual plays and just what seems to be popular in tabletop role-playing games. And I think about how different it is to the games I started playing back in the 1980s and still run now. And the crazy thing is, of course, that I am a game master. I'm running games for people and they are enjoying the games that I'm running. I've got 3 regular games on at the moment, or 2.5, let's call it, regular games on at the moment. And everybody's really happy with those. You know, the players are enjoying it, telling me how much, how good it is, and all that business. And then I look at sort of what people are saying about how you should run role-playing games and how role-playing games should be. And I look at actual plays, particularly successful actual plays, and I think, but that's not what I do. That's no relation to what I do at all. So am I doing it wrong? Are they doing it wrong? Or are we both doing it right? And on a good day, I'm thinking, well, we're both doing it right. We're just catering to a different audience. So I slightly slipped into one of those, why am I doing this? What have I got to say? Moods this afternoon. So that did not help. Then I started actually putting the map together. I knew what map I wanted to do today, because I need it for Saturday. Well, actually, that's not strictly speaking true. I can easily coast another week, or another fortnight, technically, because I run that game fortnightly. On a Saturday, through startplaying.games, I alternate 2 different campaigns. And I do AD&D 2nd edition one week, and I do D&D 5th edition the next week, and I just alternate between the 2. So I've got the 2 games going without needing to find another slot to do the other one. And my 5th edition group, they've just arrived back in their starting town of Iriane. I've talked about Iriane before. I've shown the map. I've done some mapping for this campaign on stream before. And their next job that they've got already queued up that they need to do is they need to travel to the Ruins of Fellight and investigate there. There is a quest that they have to do. There's a sealed wizard's tower there, and there's a wizard who wants to get into that and believes there's a teleport circle leading to it in Fellight and wants people to go and find that and copy all the runes and things around it. So that's the idea, is to go there and find everything that he needs to be able to get into the tower, essentially. So this means I need a map of the ruins for them to go and investigate. Now, I don't absolutely need it for Saturday, because they've got a 45-mile journey between the 2. I can spin that out to a session, no worries. Use a random encounter along the way, and bingo, you know, you've got another session, maybe even 2 sessions before they even get there. But I want it ready. I want to know that their destination is set. So started looking at creating a map. First off, I thought I'd use the same mapping style as Iriane, and then I started that it wasn't feeling quite right to me, so I started again. And I started thinking, well, these are ruins, so really I want to try and find a mapping style that includes ruins and derelict buildings. So that's going to be what I need. So I started looking and I found a mapping style that will work nicely for that. And I started mapping with that. And it did not go as planned. Not at all. So what I ended up with... Hang on a moment. I just want to quickly click a button there. That's better. And what I wanted to do was get that nice map set up. So I'm going to go now. Yeah, there won't be any major spoilers because I'm not going to explain any of the detail of any of these buildings, what's significant, what isn't. Points of interest, things like that aren't going to appear on this. So that's not going to be a problem. You'll have just seen the map ahead of time. I'm deliberately staying spoiler free for this and just doing this ruined map. I'm going to swap to this view so you can see the map properly. And the problem that I ran into was I started this map. I found a mapping style that I thought looked really good. Let's zoom in and look at these buildings. We've got a nice mix here of, they're thatched buildings, but they're clearly, older, derelict thatched. It's designed as a kind of a slightly rundown gothic-y style. It's not just for ruined areas, but for sort of a more dark fantasy, maybe, city design. I really rather like it. This comes from, I want to say 2022, something like that, Cartographer's Annual. It's the Darkland City style, anyway, by Sue Daniels. They released 2 issues for that in that. Well, technically, I suppose they did 3 in that year. Darklands was an overland style. Darkland City was a city style to go with it. And then Darkland City 2 added additional symbols and more tools to the Darkland City style. So it took up, for the whole thing, it took up 3 of the 12 months for that year's annual. But it gave you a lot of overland and city mapping capability. Should work quite nicely. So I thought we'd go with that. And I really like these textures. Problem is, when I started a map, I wasn't getting these textures. I was getting a low-res version of it, essentially. And I honestly don't know whether that was making the map with those textures or whether it was just displaying those textures. And when I exported the map, it would have looked fine. I don't know, but I didn't want to take that risk of drawing a whole map and then finding all the textures are wrong. So I started looking into solutions. I loaded up the sample maps and the textures on that were fine. And if I added buildings to those maps, they looked fine still. As an experiment, I tried resaving one of the sample files and then just deleting the whole map content, drawing some new buildings onto them, and they came out fine. So I was thinking, worst case, I can do that. But I really wanted to have it working properly, just as a new file. I looked into some various options on the way it displays the textures. For example, if I just bring this up, we've got a display speed dialog here. So the bitmap quality is set to, automatic bitmap quality is set to high. I checked the fill style resolutions. Those were, in fact, higher than the samples given in the help file, the forum post that I saw about this. Everything seemed to be exactly as it was on the sample file in the new file, and I didn't know what the problem was. But when I then started doing some more tests, absolutely fine. Textures came through, no problem. So I looked at things that might have been wrong. None of them seemed to be, and now it's all right. So I don't know what fixed it. I don't know if, in fact, I fixed it or just avoided something that had gone wrong the first time I tried. But one way or another, it's now giving me what I want. As you can see, looking at this, if I just slightly shift this down a bit so we can see, we've got some really nice textures here. We've got these tiled roofs, which I've just put a few of them in so far. We've got these aging thatch. There's 2 thatch styles on here. That one is, I believe, the derelict thatch. We also have an aged thatch, which I just draw one in by way of a demonstration. Yeah, that's a lighter tone. That's far from new. It's not that bright yellow. Isn't this pretty thatch? That's more of an aging, it's been around for a while thatch, but it's not derelict. It's being looked after. But I'm using the derelict thatch in this because it's a derelict city. It is a derelict city. It's a derelict town, village. It's a ruin. We've got these lovely ruins. These are bitmap symbols. We've got some nice bitmap symbols with this style. For both building types, you know, we've got the thatch and we've got the tile. We've also got some city walls and things like that, and some nice little frills that we can attach to buildings to make them look better. And here we've got our ruins, and there's a number of different ruin sort of templates. This is a random symbol. The way random symbols work, anytime that you see a little R in the corner of the symbol, if you see a plus in the corner of the symbol in the symbol catalog, it means there's more than one symbol in that, and it will cycle through them. If it's got a plus and an R in a box, that means it will randomly select the next symbol each time you select a symbol. And you can cycle through them by hitting tab. So we can go through and pick a ruin that we like. There's not a great many ruins, but there's a few to choose from. Oh, I haven't actually got one of those anywhere, so I'm going to put one of them in now. So what I'm doing here is I'm lining it up with I'm trying to line it up with the road. In order to get it lined up with the road, okay, I put it off where I want it to be now, so I'm going to have to move it afterwards. But then once it's lined up and selected, I can then move it in and out to get it the right distance from the road. I'll put it in place, finish. Then I'm going to shift it to place it more evenly between those two buildings. Now, if you look at the building on the other side of the road, of the road. Okay, so I haven't greeted anybody yet. I do apologise. Hello, Drut. Hello, Hiram. Hello, Alia. Hello, Chrono. Hello, anybody who's watching this on VOD. So if we look at this building on the north side of the road here, we can see that that's actually got some shading in the middle and the one down here hasn't. And that's actually down to ground textures. So what I've done is I've taken the default earth texture, I'll take the dark one here, and just drawn that around the inside of the ruin. And then when I redraw that and the sheet effects kick in, that sort of fades down to just being sort of effectively some shading underneath the ruin. It just makes it look that little bit better, which we rather like. So let's have a look at the maps. Oh, and over here we can see one of the bitmap rather than this isn't drawn. These buildings are effectively they're vector buildings with a bitmap texture. This is actually just a bitmap building, hence it's got a lot more detail and holes in the roof and so forth. And this is where I had the problems, because the problem that I had was that because I wasn't getting the right textures through on the buildings, if I placed any of the bitmap ones, they'd look radically out of place compared to the other things. Whereas now, you know, that's basically the same roof texture. It's just this one's got a lot more sort of overgrowth and some holes in it and things like that. So, obviously I haven't done much of the surrounds of this town yet, and also I want to do a bit more of the town, but I didn't want to do too much of it before getting on stream. I wanted to be sure it was all working, and then so I did this during Drut's stream, and then get onto the stream and actually show what I was doing. Now, one thing I've done is I've rather cheated on the roads because I want this kind of derelict look. So I don't want roads and paths that look nice and neat. So what I've done with these is I've actually replaced the roads that I originally used. These are created using the random road tools, or the random street tools. What I've done, I started out using this default 7.5 foot road. 7.5 is an odd measurement, but that's what this one uses. And I'm going to put another one of these in here. I'm going to start it here. It doesn't really matter how accurately I start because it's not going to stay there. But I'm just going to arc that round and down towards where the other buildings over here are. Then let's zoom to show that section. And what I'm going to do then, I am going to select my random street. Now at the moment I've got it set up for derelict medium. I've got a number of selections for this. This is Campaign Cartographer's annual number 177, in fact. And I've got a default. Then I've got, interestingly, I've got default large, medium, and small, which is kind of cute. So I can choose to have small buildings, for example, and that will be a selection of, the default is a selection of slate and thatched. But I'm trying to use the derelict stuff, so I don't really want those per se. Then we've got, again, medium, small, derelict, and derelict roofs. I'm not sure what derelict roofs is compared to the others. No, I've got absolutely no idea what derelict roofs is doing. It looks quite big. It looks like derelict. It looks like that's the large version. I think that's actually a typo. I think that's... no, I know what they've done. So we've got thatch roofs, slate roofs, and then derelict roofs. So that's the large version. Then we've got also a small and a medium version of that. And we've got the slate ones, and we've got the thatch ones, which is a lighter colour thatch, sort of the aged thatch rather than the derelict thatch. But I want derelict. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my derelict small, because I'm going to say that this is... this is not a big town or city. Oops. Just reused the same command instead of going to the default. I accidentally activated the street settings rather than the street. There. So we will start our street. We will pick a location. And we will put in a row of buildings. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, if this is supposed to be a derelict town and it's not that big a town, why is it quite so? Why we've got quite this level of building density over here? And the answer is that it's easy. That's what the street creates. It's also easy, however, to say I don't want this many buildings. So let's take out the ones that I think are least appropriate, or just ones that will thin it out a bit. So I'll just remove a few, and now we're back to looking a little bit more like the rest of the place. A bit patchy, plenty of spacing between the buildings, and also, of course, room for me to put in maybe another slate roof or two, or a ruin or two. So actually, let's delete one more. Let's get rid of that one there as well. The next thing I'm going to do is, I like these fractal paths that this one has. Now that fractal path tool, because of the way the fractal works, you can't use the random street with it. Because the random street, essentially, every time the fractal kinks, every time the path kinks because of the fractals, that's the end of the road as far as the tool is concerned, and it just can't draw a street. Hence, I've used this nice straight street to put my street in, and now I am going to delete that, find the tool that I actually want to put in there, go to my roads and select the 4-foot path. We'll start it here, and I'm having to use fairly small movements on the mouse here, because obviously the further I go, the more extreme the fractal variation becomes. If I move a long way, I'll get big arcs in the fractal, and if I move a small way, I'll get small arcs in the fractal. And I want to be able to, I want to do that so that it fits into the existing road. And I think it just looks a little bit more worn down and nasty now than it did before, which is what I'm gunning for, really. So let's put some manual buildings in. Now, as always, we can have fun with the building designer. I don't think I've really done much of a air quote, tutorial on using this building designer. But the insert building tool has quite a lot of features. First off, we can pick our house shape. So we can have a basic rectangle, we can have L shapes. We've got a few tools on here that look quite similar. So we've got two L shapes, for example. One of them is a nice even symmetrical L shape that you just draw as if it was a rectangle, but it's actually an L. The other one lets you set the width of the two portions of the L separately. So you get a slightly different feel of that one. So I'm going to select a slate roof. We don't have, I wish we had a slate derelict. It would be really nice if there was a derelict slate, like with slightly tatty roof, but I suppose that's too much to ask. So we'll go with our slate roof, and we're going to select that second L shape and try and remember which way around we have to draw these. This is going to be the fun part. And I think I'm going to start here because here is a nice reasonable place. So I'm going to draw my first line, and then I'm going to come out from there to give me a rectangle. And from there, I'm now moving in and initially setting both arcs of this. And when I've selected that, it then lets me reshape the second arc. So I can do that. I'm going to make it actually slightly thicker. So I've just got a strange little, almost like a porch, but on the wrong side of the house, sticking out the back there. We can also have fun with this tool with these little add-ons. So for example, I can really mess with this building by selecting a point within the house, selecting a house edge at the front here. I can then move how far out I want my porch to come, select that, and then I can select the width of my porch. So like that, for example. And now I've got a nice sort of custom shaped house there. Obviously, if you're building houses that way, it takes a lot more work for each house. But if you're willing to put the time in and the effort in, and if there are specific significant buildings within your city or your town, it lets you do a really good job on creating these interestingly shaped buildings. And then, for good measure, you can use the floor plan tool to create you a basic, what it will do is it will create a foundation, create a new map with a foundation shape based on the building that you have selected, which is really very, very neat, because you can draw your nice flash, what you want your mansion, whatever, to look like in your town map. And then you can export a foundation map that you can use to map the interior of the building. Suddenly you've got your haunted house to muck about with in your adventure. Lots of fun doing things like that. Now, an issue that I had earlier on, and I've saved this to be sure, just in case it does it to me again. An issue I was having earlier on is when I tried to then group those, because these technically aren't one building at the moment. This is two buildings as far as the software is concerned. So what I need to do is I need to group those together. And when I tried this earlier on, it went horribly wrong. So I select my two things, I say do it, it groups them. And this time it has grouped them absolutely fine. The thing that it has done, however, is it has seemingly moved them off the building sheet, because I'm no longer getting the drop shadow and so forth. So I'll just, it's moved it to the currently selected sheet, which is the flat ruins. Normally I don't need to worry about that. When I use a building tool, it automatically puts it on a building sheet. But because I grouped them together, it moved it to the current sheet. So if I put it back on the building sheet, then when I redraw, it gets its shadow back. And there we go. We've got a nice slate roof building with a quite wide porch at the front. I think that must have once been a shop of some kind, I would imagine, with that porch at the front. Seems to work quite nicely. Possibly that's an attached outhouse at the back, or possibly it's just an interesting shape to the building. I don't have a grid on here at the moment to give us an idea of scale. So I think now would be an excellent time, perhaps, to draw such a grid. So, as usual, I will go to my Draw menu, and I will select Hex or Square Overlay. And let's go with a battle map grid. I'm going to turn off the set snap and the labels. I don't need any labeling, and I don't need it to snap to the grid that I'm drawing. This grid is purely informational. I don't want to be using it when drawing. If you do want to use the grid when drawing, such as if you're drawing a dungeon map, then obviously you draw the grid early on, preferably first, and set the snap points so that you're snapping to the grid, and then everything can be nice and neat. But I prefer more organic feel to my maps, so I don't tend to snap to the grid unless I absolutely have to. So I'm going to set this at a 5-foot grid because this is D&D. Hit apply, and it draws us our 5-foot grid over the entire thing. Let's now take a look and see what the grid is using. It's got a transparency, which I want. I don't want it at 75% opacity. I probably only want it at 50% opacity. So we'll set our grid to 50% opacity. And now we've got an idea at a glance as to, even 50% feels too much to me here. So let's in fact set that to 33%. So now we can get an idea of what we're looking at here. So that little sort of bit sticking out at the back of the shop there is maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. So a single room in the back, possibly a workshop. If this is a shop, it might be a crafter there, and that might be a small workshop at the back. Or it could alternatively be a small storeroom at the back. Who knows? The main reason, if you're not snapping to it, the main reason to start with the grid early on is just purely so you can eyeball distances, so you can get an idea of what you're drawing. If you know that you need a building that is, say, 30 foot by 15 foot, and you've got a 5-foot grid on there, you can get a very clear idea about when you're drawing the right size, and even theoretically draw it using the grid as a guide, and then just rotate and move it into position, so you've got a building the size that you want it to be. If you're doing dungeons, again, gives you a clear idea of how big the rooms are. I do snap to grid more often on dungeons, but I do find I tend, as a game master, to get a bit frustrated with those nice, neat, everything's in a multiple of 5 feet rooms in dungeons that you so often find. So I try not to use them too much if I can at all help it. So we've got, I reckon we've got enough of the building, of the town. Fellight was never supposed to be a big town, so I don't think we need more buildings than that. I think that's probably absolutely fine. So now I'm going to spend some time doing the bit that I'm bad at. I'm fine at drawing the buildings and getting a town layout. What I'm bad at is then drawing the environment around it. As you can see, I've made a start on this. I'm just using the base city background for this. There's a couple of ways I could have done this. I could have chosen to use, say, the earth backdrop and then used the texture tool to put the city background in underneath the town. But I didn't do that, obviously. I just put it on the default city backdrop. It's kind of designed, this particular symbol set, this mapping style, it's kind of designed to draw sections of a city, so it sort of expects that the whole map is likely to have that city backdrop. And obviously then I've drawn in the lake. This is on a lakeside. We can see that if we go to the the map of the region, we can see Ruins of Fellight here on the edge of this currently nameless lake. I'll have to come up, make sure that I've got a name for that lake by the time my player characters get here. It's a good couple of miles probably south of the hills, so I don't need to worry about hills for it. I just need to worry about it being lakeside. It's also quite a distance north of this other river, so I don't need to worry about that being on the map either. There is an argument to be made as to it being badly positioned, that maybe it should be where that river meets the lake. I think in this case the river is actually running from the lake rather than into the lake, and the one from the north is the one that is feeding this lake. but I'm quite happy with it where it is. It's not, for example, a trading village, so it's not going to be using that waterway for trade. So anywhere along the coast of the lakeshore would have been absolutely fine. I probably will if we've got them, and if not, I'll bring them in from a different symbol mapping style. Yep, I'm going to have to go with a different mapping style to get some piers, some fishing wharfs. But that's fine. I can bring them in from another mapping style to do that. But what I do want to do is I want this to sort of be an obviously ruined area, but it's also kind of semi-cursed. So not fully haunted and cursed. It's not burned out, but it's also not overgrown, it's not verdant. So hence I've not gone with like a grass backdrop. I've got this earth up here, I've got a lighter colour earth down there, and I want to try and just like layer a few of these textures and get something that works. Now, I am not an artist. I'm making this shit up as I go along. And I will delete things that I don't like the look of. So this is going to be pretty much experimental at this stage. We've got some field textures, which are interesting, but the problem with that, of course, is this is derelict. I am wondering about putting in a field and then overlaying that field So there we go, we've got a field there now. Now that looks all terribly neat, and like this place is not at all derelict. But I'm wondering, what if I were then to take, say, my earth terrain and, to all intents and purposes, chop holes out of it. I mean, I've used the wrong field. What I should have used, of course, have used something like that, which looks more like a field that hasn't been planted yet. But as I said, I'm making this up as I go along. I'm experimenting with this. Now that's interesting. The fields go over the top of the underlying terrain textures. That is useful to know. So the way the sheets have been set up, I do not want to delete my grid. Let's deselect my grid. And let's in fact go into the layers and freeze the hex and square grid so that I can't delete the grid now. But we'll have a look at the sheet. We've got a crops sheet apparently. Looking at that, sheet crops 1. Oh, right. So when I used that tool, it created a crops sheet which didn't exist previously. So I can actually move that sheet, that crops sheet, I can move up and put it where I want it to be. So I can put it, for example, underneath the vegetation sheet, definitely, because that way I can, have it overgrown. I can put other vegetation over the top of it. So let's have another look at what we've got here. And let's try for this version of a field, which is looks more like a ploughed but not yet actually growing anything field. That looks quite good. And again, that's over the top of the that looks to be over the top of the background symbols. So terrain, oh no, that's weird. It's not put it on the terrain fields sheet. We've got a terrain fields sheet. So let's change that. Let's change its sheet. We want to set it on terrain fields plowed, since we've got a terrain fields plowed. That's probably, oh yeah, that's interesting. That then becomes, that's got some effects on that, doesn't it? So fields ploughed, that has an edge fade and a blend mode. So blend mode, multiply opacity 50%. I kind of want it to be more than 50%, I feel. I think in this instance, I'm going the opposite way, unlike the grid. So let's try it at 65, so it's a little bit more solid. I'm fine with the edge fade, that I'm okay with. So that's an inner edge fade, so that means, fairly obviously, that what it's doing is it's fading it out from the outside in, essentially. So the fade comes inside the square rather than outside the square, if that makes any sense to you. And we've got a couple of bits of texture, background texture that are visible there. Whether they're underneath it or on top of it doesn't really matter at this point, because the opacity means that they are visible. So it's not a neatly ploughed field. The fact that there's any indication of a ploughed field at all is still a little bit dodgy, but I just kind of want to work something in there to make it look a bit different. So let's look for, what do we have in the way of, there we go, we've got terrain, default normal grass. Let's have some grass over this, and we'll just squiggle in a shape here. I think I may have just drawn a mutated Easter bunny, but then the edge fade will stop it looking like an Easter bunny, so that's fine. And let's see what we have in the way of symbol styles. Now, in addition to the existing symbols, the ones that come with this style also loads in bitmap A. Bitmap A style, which is one of the ones that comes with City Designer. City Designer 3 comes with a vector style and 2 bitmap styles. And somewhere down the line during the creation of this, they decided that the bitmap A matched quite nicely with this particular mapping style, with the symbols that come with this. So when I go to select symbol catalog, it gives me the bitmap A options that I can use as well. So that means that in amongst there, I should have, I've got eastern vegetation, but I don't have vegetation. Now, I'm a little worried about this. I'm a little worried about getting back to my original catalog, because that catalog isn't showing in this, but hopefully we'll be fine, and I can figure that out. Let's look at eastern vegetation and see what it gets us. So that gets us these. Okay, so these are designed for like pseudo-Japanese mapping. Now some of that, bushes and trees are bushes and trees, to be honest, to some extent. I don't really want any palm trees in this map. I don't think that's appropriate. Yeah, this is true. This is part of why I wanted it there, because I knew there would be some evidence that this used to be a field. Whether that would show, and I suppose particularly on a map like this, because if we think of this map as being an aerial view, we've all seen Time Team, I'm sure. We all know that you get up there in your helicopter, or these days you get up there with your drone, your camera on a drone, and that's when you can really see where the fields used to be, that you can't spot on foot. When you're walking around, you don't see it so much, but from up above, wow, look at that, there was a field there. So it seems suitable to put it onto to a map in that way. Right, let's make sure of what sheet I'm on, because if I'm placing vegetables, if I'm placing bushes and things, I guess I want to be on the vegetation sheet. But I also don't think that when I place these, it's going to put them there. These are symbols, so it's going to put them on a symbols sheet. Just looking at whether we've got a symbols sheet for trees and things, and the answer seems to be no. We've got symbols flat roof, symbols towers, symbols walls, symbols outcrop. So there's a PDF guide that comes with each of the styles in the annual, which explains how you use all of these, and as a work through on building a map. What it does is it talks you through building the sample map that comes with it, essentially. Being A, a man, and B, ADHD, I haven't read that. I'm just making this up as I go along. Partly just because that's my style, and partly because, honestly, if I can just make this up as I go along and create something that looks halfway decent with it, then anybody, especially if they actually bother to read the instructions, can make something that looks halfway decent with it. Yeah, this is true. They could well imply ruins under that. So I'm going to go with, I'm actually going to create a new, actually, I don't know, vegetation has a wall shadow, implying that it is expecting me to put my trees and things on there. But I don't think it'll put it on there automatically because it will look for a sheet with the word symbols on, I would expect. Well, let's try it and see. If it doesn't put them on that sheet, I can move them. So let's get some bushes. And we'll kind of scatter a few bushes around. Obviously, we're going to want them in other places, but we'll just scatter a few around this field to be going on with. Nope, good, they're not all the same bush, because this bush is one of those ones that, as I said, has multiple options. So if I press the little plus button in the corner, it'll actually break that down, and I can see that we've got 3 different bushes, slightly different shapes, slightly different color textures on there. And every time I place one of these, it will randomly place one of those bushes every time I place it. So that's done that. Now, if I do this, those are likely to become, they have a heck of a drop shadow on them for what are only bushes, because I think it has put them on the symbols sheet. I'm going to test this theory by hiding the symbols sheet. And as if by magic, they disappear, because that is exactly where it put them, just where I thought it would. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to copy the vegetation sheet, essentially. I'm going to add a sheet. I am going to call it Symbols Bushes. I could just have a low symbols sheet, but I'm going to go with bushes in this instance. I'm going to copy the vegetation effects onto my symbols bushes thing. Then I'm going to check the wall shadow, because I think it's going to be too strong a wall shadow probably. So I'll edit that. 40% opacity is not unreasonable. Length 10, blur radius 2, way more than I want it to be. So I'm going to drop that all the way down to 3 and 0.6. I think those numbers picked off the top of my head as being something that might look okay. We'll try it and see. But I still need to move them to that sheet. So now I need change properties, and I need to select each of my bushes. I need to actually select the bush, because if I miss when selecting, as you just saw, it becomes a bounding box, which will select, theoretically, the terrain texture underneath that I don't want to be doing. I don't know why I just looked at my mic instead of my camera there. I'm not good at talking to camera. So we're going to set them to change all of them to the symbols bushes sheet. And then when I redraw, yeah, now they are much closer to the ground, and I think rather more reasonable for that. Now, if I want this to look really good, obviously I am going to have to do this kind of stuff over pretty much the whole map. Lot of work if you want to get a really good map. So this is where you have to think, why am I making this map as a GM? My maps are normally, they look quite good. People look at my maps, they like my maps, but they are not like the stuff that you find professionally done, because I just don't put the time and effort in. Plus, those professionals, because that's what they are and what they do, they can do the same work as me in a fraction of the time. So all that extra detail and all the bits and pieces that make it look really good, that's why they get paid. Whereas with me, I'm just a game master. I just need a map that will look good enough for my players. So I tend to split the difference between here is the thing that needs to be here so that you can see what shape it is, and here is the lovely, beautiful, ornate map. And somewhere between the two tends to be where my maps fall. And it depends on partly on how I'm feeling at the time, and partly on how often the map is going to get used, how much I actually put that, how much work I put into any given map. If I'm mapping the town that is going to be their home base for several adventures, I'll put more work into it than if I'm mapping a ruin that they're going to visit for one adventure and probably never come back to. So we've got a field there. Let's now see about how much we can ruin our field, while at the same time, continuing this idea that we want to bring the outside world onto our map. So I'm going to do some more of the earth here, and I'm going to bring it round. And over here, I'm actually going to cut it across the edge of the field and down to the bottom. Now, these tools, it varies from tool to tool in this software. These tools do not snap to the edge of the map. A lot of tools will. You can just safely go off the edge of the map and it'll stop at the edge of the map and draw along the edge there. These ones do not do that. So what I'm doing is I'm going just over the edge of the map, and you can see hopefully where that has now just slightly overlapped the edge of the map. But the map frame has got essentially a large white border around the outside that sits up on the top layer. So when it redraws, that hides anything that's gone slightly over the edge of the map and gives you a nice crisp edge for your map. And that's how it gives us our lovely look. So that's brought this lighter coloured earth has now extended around there and slightly overlapped the edge of the field there, made the field a little bit less neat. And we're going to do some more darker earth to move in addition to that. And as I say, I am making this up very much as I go along. And I don't really know what I'm doing. So if it looks good, I'll keep it. And if it doesn't look good, I won't, is essentially the way this is going to work out. I need to redraw that so that I can see how it looks. Okay, so yeah, we're starting to get some layering, essentially, on the terrain texture around the outside there. I can understand why why that discussion would make you want to watch Time Team Drudder. Of course, Time Team are all over YouTube. So that's a thing. You can go and watch Time Team when you've finished watching me. Let's have some more vegetation, shall we? And let's go with some green. We could definitely use some green. Well, we don't want the fields, we just want, there we go, grass, normal grass. Apparently there is such a thing as normal grass. Normal grass, normal grass. Sorry, Mystery Science Theatre 3000, the movie reference there, which was a very silly thing for me to be doing. Keep the grass in down there. Now that didn't really work out so well. I put those in the wrong place because we've got that odd gap between the two. I really want these to overlap properly. So I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to turn the effects off for a moment. And I'm going to move some of these points. So let's move that point to there. And then the next point that I want to move is that point, which will go to there. And then that point will go to there. Hopefully, when I turn the effects back on, we won't have... We've still got a bit of an odd delineation between the two where they're both fading back. Maybe I should overlap them further. Yes, I think I should overlap them further, shouldn't I? So we will come back to... Now, the tricky part here is now I'm having to move this one because I can't actually reach the points on the other one. But that's okay. I can just use that to overlap that further. And effects on. And that should do, especially when we zoom out a little bit further. That's not bad. I'm not unhappy with that. I'm not saying I'm happy with that, but I'm not unhappy with that. I've only got one field. It's a fair size field. But I'm wondering, should I have more than one field here? Maybe I should have a field up on the north side as well. Might be an idea. So back to our ploughed field tool that we rather liked. Which field did I use? Did I use field 3 or field 2 or field 1? I think I used field 2, didn't I? Let's use field 2 again. And let's come into this L shape in the village here, in the village layout. We won't worry about the fact that we are overlapping the earth texture because we want that. These aren't actually working fields. These are not as they should have been. It's also not square, but I don't think that our fantasy peasants really used set squares when they were sorting these fields out. I think they just kind of grew them, ploughed them. So let's move that to the ploughed fields, and there we go. And again, I'm going to want to do some messing. I think I am actually going to move this corner if I can catch it. I think I am actually going to turn the effects off and move this corner because with the effects turned on and the edge fade, it's much harder to snag that. Why didn't you dynamically edit that? What went wrong there? Come on. Catch that corner. No, you are not going to let me, are you? Okay, apparently it's not going to let me, so I'm just going to leave that as it is then. Sod it. Odd, because that's a shape. I should be able to edit the vertices on it, and for some reason it's not letting me, and I don't know why. Never mind. Let's just turn the effects back on and make do. Maybe I'll put something along here to mask the fact that that corner isn't even. Let's go with, I know what we'll go with. We've got a scorched earth sort of terrain texture. I am going to put in an area of scorched earth around here. Now, our scorched earth does not use the same sheet as other terrain textures, so it doesn't have as much opacity and it doesn't have as firm an edge fade on it, so that you get a far more well delineated area of scorch. You can see where I've used it already. I put it under a couple of the ruined buildings. I've just got earth textures beneath these ones, so these are just buildings that have fallen apart over the years, but here we've got a couple that actually burned down. I put the scorched texture behind there. And now we've got this scorched area along the edge of the field there. There was clearly a fire here at some point. What I would really like, and I don't know where I can get them. I know where I can add them in my VTT. I've got some excellent assets from Gabriel Picard, which include burned out trees and things like that I can place onto that area in my virtual tabletop. I don't know if I've got any such assets in Campaign Cartographer. Now, the way CC works, obviously I can create symbols from any bitmaps I've got. That is a thing that I could do. I could take the Gabriel Picard assets that I've got, and I could make a symbol set with them for Campaign Cartographer. I couldn't distribute that symbol set, but I could make one for my personal use. And I think I'd have to check the licensing on it, and I think I would be okay with distributing the maps made using those assets, because I think that's okay. A lot of these assets, the license under which they're made available is that you can basically distribute the end result, but you can't distribute the actual assets. So I suspect I would probably be fine with distributing maps made with that symbol set. But that's something I would have to research before doing it, because I wouldn't want to tread on anybody's toes and mess with the copyright. They're extremely reasonably priced to begin with. Really, some of the cheapest and best map assets that I've found anywhere. I've just noticed your comment there, Trut. I'm not going to apologise. I'm not going to apologise at all. So let's have a look. What other symbols can I... Oh, now I've got no available symbol catalogues. That's weird. That's why. Because you got the Eastern Vegetation filter on it. So if I remove that, and then what's it showing me? Now it's showing me my CA177 buildings again. But I for some reason no longer have the symbol set 1 symbols that it was showing me before. So, we've got a CA177 vegetation. So this symbol set actually has it has its own vegetation, and that includes burned trees. Let's have a couple of burned trees in our burned area there. That's cool. Glad that was there. So that's clearly a burned tree. That is... Oh, that's a burning tree. Right, well, I don't need that. But it's nice to have. Is that not nice to have? I can have a burning tree on my map if I actually want. That's kind of cool. I don't want a burning tree on this map, because this is all supposed to have happened years ago. However, I've got trees and I've got dead plant life, which works nicely with the dead trees and things, which works nicely with the whole derelict nature of the thing. I can have a combination of some burned stuff, some dead stuff, and some that is actually reasonably healthy. So let's just go with some trees and actually place some still perfectly valid and happy trees, thank you very much, in here. Particularly, we'll have some trees along the lake shore. Then we'll check what sheet it has put them all on. I suspect it has put them all on the symbols sheet. Do I want to put them somewhere else? Theoretically, I could move them all to vegetation. That would seem reasonable, wouldn't it? So, let's change properties and select each of our trees, dead and otherwise, because I may as well put them all on the same sheet. Oops, I don't want the lake, however. So let's combine not the lake, and we'll move all of those to that vegetation sheet that we know is there. See what that looks like. See if that does something weird to them. Yeah, that looks fine to me. I'm okay with that. So again, there's not a lot of it there as yet, and I'm going to need more. But we're going along the right lines. We've got reeds. Now the reeds are potentially useful because we do have obviously a lakeshore. I could put some reeds along the lakeshore. I'd really like some bushes rather than just the burned and burning trees. I would very much like some... why is that insisting on going to Eastern Vegetation? Because that's not even the last thing that I selected. Okay, what have we got in our nature selection? We've got debris. We've got burnt wood or something. We've got burning. We've got thatch fires. I could put thatch fires in my town. Again, I don't want them on this map, but it's nice that I have them there. And because these are obviously just bitmap files that are installed when you install the software and the annual, theoretically, I can hunt down the location of these files. Actually, I already know pretty much where they are. They're in program data. I can look in program data for these files, and I could take them out and copy them to the folder where my virtual tabletop keeps its assets, so that I can use them directly within Fantasy Grounds. An excellent way of making tweaks to your maps when you're actually playing is to use the same assets in your virtual tabletop as you use in Campaign Cartographer. So just give it access to the Campaign Cartographer assets. And that way, if you randomly decide to add an additional building or what have you, or an extra tree onto your map within the virtual tabletop, it matches the style of the ones that are already on the map because it's the same assets that you're using to draw it. So that's actually a really good way of going about things. Let's see what we get. What is this debris? Leave us zoom in and place some debris somewhere. It looks like possibly like leaf mold and stuff. I'm just going to place it there and then zoom in on it and get a proper look at what it is. Oh no, it is actually debris. Why have they put that under nature? That's ruined building material. Why is it under nature? So what I can do with that, of course, for starters, I need to move it to the flat symbol sheet, because it doesn't. That pile of debris is not going to want, a huge great wall shadow. But I could, for example, move that over and let's just rotate it a bit. Just rotate it like that. I could place it like so. And then I could, if I can select it, I could move it to the symbols flat ruins sheet. And that distinguishes that particular ruin that little bit more, because now we've got our ruin, but also in the corner we've got the collapsed material from that ruin there, and that actually looks quite nice. And it slightly masks the fact that maybe I've used the same ruin more than once, because that is the same as this burned out building over here. So that bit of extra detail on that with the debris actually hides that quite nicely. And we've got multiple debris symbols. How many different symbols have we got for the debris? Oh yeah, we've actually got a few of them. Now, I was saying earlier about the way these random symbols work, that it picks one at random when you select, each time you place one. But what you can also do is if you press the plus to open them up and look at all of the symbols, you can then select one specifically. So I can select maybe this one here, which has just a few symbols, and I can place that onto there, so that I've just got a little bit of rubble around that one. And again, I'm going to want to put that onto the correct sheet. I'm going to want it on the flat ruins symbol sheet. And I think I should, if I'm going to be doing this, I should select that as my current sheet, so that it'll automatically place them on that sheet and I don't need to adjust them. And I could obviously do this with the burned out ones as well, but I don't think I am going to put any rubble into the burned out ones. They're burned out. It's a different thing. But we will put some into that one there. And there we go. Now we've got some rubble and debris scattered around those demolished buildings. So that looks, it's just a nice little touch. You know, it's not a necessary touch, but it's nice. Another thing I was considering doing with one of these is maybe, and I'd have to go back to the appropriate symbol catalogue, obviously, but I was considering perhaps putting, these are very big burned out planks. I was considering putting some, I'm going to shrink that. Let's set that at 0.6. I was considering putting some, possibly somewhere, a tree growing out of one of the ruined buildings. So we've got a couple of burned out planks there on that burned out building. That looks quite nice. So again, we've got multiple symbols here, and if I open them up, I can select the specific symbols if I wish to. Place a few more around there. And they don't show up desperately well because obviously they're black and burned planks on burned out ground. But stuff like that, even if players don't necessarily actually notice them. Yeah, this is true. I was thinking I might have to do something to highlight those the burned out trees from the scorched earth. What I was just saying about the planks, those are fine because it doesn't matter whether you don't notice them. They're likely to register on an unconscious level, even if they don't register on a conscious level. But with the trees, you do want something a bit more. And I think those... See, they don't look bad when you're zoomed in on them, but it comes down to, what resolution are we going to export this at? If we export it at too high a resolution, it takes forever to transfer across the VTT to the players. So maybe they could do with some highlighting. Let's take a look at our vegetation sheet, which is what we've got them on, and look at what the glow is. So that's actually currently got a black glow. So that black glow works fine against a tree on grass, for example. The black glow is going to help distinguish it. But on the burned out ground, that black glow does not help us at all. What we could do, however, I am going to copy that glow, and then I am going to copy that glow, then I'm going to paste that glow. So I've now got that glow, same glow, twice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the second one, edit it, and I'm going to set it to white. Now it's probably going to be too strong, but we'll find out. Yeah, that is too strong, but I can tone that down a little bit, and now we've got the black glow to separate it out from the ground underneath, but then around that we've got that white glow to highlight it a bit more. And if I turn that glow down a bit, it's currently at 12.5, so let's drop it down to 6% and a blur radius of 0.6. And again, as I say, I'm just making these numbers up and seeing what they look like. Yeah, I think that works quite nicely. It's subtle enough not to be intrusive, but it does separate them out from the underlying scorched earth, and make them more visible. So there we go. That solves that problem. And thank you for pointing that out, Alia, because I was thinking that myself, but then I got distracted and had forgotten I was going to fix it. So, we still need, obviously, more detail, making this kind of nice. I don't think there's much from here. I mean, I could theoretically put a couple of sheep absently grazing through the fields, to the village if I wanted to, but I would be inclined to put them in on the VTT rather than on the map. So we won't do that right now. We do have some boulders. We have an interesting selection of boulders of various sizes. And those, certainly outside of the village, we should probably use. We should give ourselves some. These are just coming in flat now because I've just realized I'm putting them in the ruins, which is not what I actually want to do, of course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these boulders. Okay, I am going to change my zoomed view slightly so I can see what I'm doing more clearly and select the correct things. Now, ideally, these should be on multiple sheets, but I don't think they're going to be. We've got a whole bunch of sheets for outcroppings, for outcrops, with top, middle, bottom, and shadows and things on there. Symbols under cliffs. There's a lot of effort has been put in to setting up the effects for the natural features on this that I would very much need, I think, to read the instruction PDF to know exactly how those are supposed to work. Do I actually have that open at the moment? I think I do, but haven't read it. Let's take a quick look through and see what it says about these. All right, rocky outcrops. Load the natural symbol catalogue by clicking. Yep, we've done that. Use the outcrop symbols to depict some cliffs, also drawing in shadows by hand with the Terrain Default Rock Shadow tool. Interesting. So that will automatically go onto the appropriate sheet when we do that, if we do that. Yeah, that's quite neat that they have basically, she's created a tool for giving us shadows on these outcroppings. That's kind of neat. But otherwise, there's no mention there of the fact that there are multiple sheets for these outcroppings. So I am just going to put these onto, I think that's symbols outcrop bottom, I think. So let's try that and see what that gives us. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that because it looks like the bottom of the outcrop is the bit with no shadow. So it's given me a shadowless version of these. And I have just tried once again to apply this to the field. So, oh, come on, give me that. There we go. Last time I didn't select that little rock. I was just going to leave it as it was, leave it flat next to the rock that has a shadow, but this time I've selected it for no good reason whatsoever. So, symbols outcrops top we have. So let's make these symbols outcrops top and see what they look like there. They still don't have a drop shadow. Interesting. I suppose because we're manually drawing the shadows when using the outcropping tools, outcrop tools. So therefore, these are not coming through with a shadow. It's expecting me to do these manually. So we've got a number of other symbol tools, however. So we've got symbols middle, symbols, symbols walls and towers. Obviously the symbols bushes that I created. So for low things, I can theoretically, I can put them on the same sheet as the bushes and they'd probably look okay. For purposes of knowing what I'm doing and organizing it for myself, I would probably rather have a second sheet with identical effects, so that I can tell what's what, rather than just have rocks on a bushes sheet. Or if I was to use a single sheet for them, I'd probably relabel that from symbols bushes to say symbols low. A lot of my dungeon maps, I do that. I have symbols flat, symbols low, symbols. And then usually the dungeon maps also have a wall symbols sheet, which is specifically for things that are attached to the walls, like torch sconces, that sort of thing. I will quite often put in a low in between the flat and normal symbols that usually already exist on the map. I'll often put in a low, which is like has roughly half the drop shadow of the standard symbols, so that you can have, so that a stall doesn't have the same level of drop shadow as a throne, for example, but is also not flat and does have some kind of drop shadow. That's a personal preference. So in this instance, I think I'm going to find out what the symbol's middle looks like. So I am going to once again select the wrong thing. However, I have selected both of those, so I can deselect the field and still have the rock selected. So let's, come on. Why won't you select that rock? It's not selecting any rocks anymore now. Okay, so I'm going to try combine and see if that'll let me start selecting rocks again. 40. Okay. That has apparently just selected 42,949,000. No, more than that. 4 billion, possibly 294,967,294 entities. So that's not right. Let's cancel that, shall we? Not sure quite what it thought it was doing there, but whatever it was, we don't want it. Right. This is now actually doing what we want it to do. Select the right things, and we will try that symbols middle sheet and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's got us a reasonable drop shadow. Oh, no, that's got more of a drop shadow than I really want it to have, hasn't it? It's not so bad for the big ones, but it's certainly too much for the small rocks. So, let's... Yeah, I know what I'm going to do. I am going to take just these two small ones, and I'm going to put them on the flat symbols, the ruins and rocks flat symbols. So the big rocks have got a drop shadow and the small rocks haven't, and I think that should work out quite nicely. I do not know what it did there. I wouldn't have thought that there were that many entities to select on this map. Something went very strange. But anyway, now we've got some big rocks there, which is a move in the right direction in terms of we're adding things. Where was our boulders? I want to select specifically some small boulders. That's not a small boulder. Okay, so since it's kind of hard to tell which are the small boulders, this is what tab is for. So I can see that this is a big rock, and if every time I hit tab, it'll cycle to a new rock from that selection, and I'm going to find some smallish ones. And I'm going to make it clear that this is no longer a going concern as a field, as a ploughed field, in that it now has rocks all over it. Now I did something a little bit clever there. I put one overlapping with this bush because I knew that the bush draws on a higher layer, a higher sheet than the rocks were, because these rocks are still going in on the flat symbols sheet. So I knew that the bush would overlap the rock and it would look quite good, rather than suddenly having a rock hovering or supported somehow by a bush. I think I'm actually going to want more texture on this field as well, and I'm going to want more texture on the other field. But I also think that we're kind of heading towards the 1.5 hour mark. So I'm thinking, is there anything else that I want to show you what I'm doing, rather than just running over the same material until I've got enough of it? And I think the answer is yes. Okay, so there was a couple of bits that I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you, for example, replacing the roads with that fractal path to give us a nice sort of somewhat dilapidated look. I also, however, want to show you making the buildings look nicer. Because I did a little of this before I came on stream. You'll see that some of these buildings have got additional detail on the top. Now, if I go back to... I just need to delete that filter so that it's... Okay, so now it's decided spontaneously that I'm seeing my CD3 symbols again. What I actually want is the CA177, and that's not finding me, CA177. I need to remove the master filter, that's why. Okay. So, nope, wrong button. Okay, so how do I change them? Nope, I can't do it except from there. So, I can delete the master filter, delete the setting filter. The master filter actually wants to be CA177, so that will show me all the ones for this mapping style. There we go. And I wanted to go back to the buildings. So now we're back on our buildings. And we can see we've got these frills that we can use. And this is what I've used on a couple of buildings already. These ones here are quite nice because they've got these bits of overgrowth on them. And I can click on a building edge. And at this point, I can only move left and right now because I'm lined up to the building edge. I'm aligned to the building edge, but I can move how far away from the building edge I want it to be. So having selected the building edge, I can then move that in and sort of by eye place them either side of the roof ridge. And now we've just got a little bit more detail on that. Where did it go? It placed it on the wrong sheet. That's where it went. It placed it on Symbols Flat Ruins. Now this is a problem. Because these are bitmap symbols I'm placing, they don't automatically go to the building sheet, which is where I want them. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that they will appear above the buildings. So I need to put them on any symbol sheet that comes lower in the list than buildings. So symbols under cliffs, for example, will do fine. I am going to select that as my current sheet, and then I'm going to try that again. Going with the dilapidated version of these frills, aligning it to the edge of the building, lining it up. Right, now that is there. And when I redraw, suddenly those frills, that detail on the top of my building gets a drop shadow because of the sheet that it's on. If I change its sheet, however, and I change it obviously to buildings because I want it to be a part of that building, it loses that. The building sheet has a drop shadow, but because those are on the same sheet, it applies the drop shadow to the outside. So essentially I can stack as many things as I want on top of one another on the same sheet, and the drop shadow will only apply on the outside of them. If I want two things on top of one another and for them both to have a drop shadow, they would need to be on a separate sheet. So for example, if I want to create a rocky outcropping with a drop shadow, and then have a second layer of outcropping on top of that has a shadow coming down onto the first one, those would need to be on two separate sheets. So I would create my rocky outcropping sheet, and then I'd create my rocky outcropping high sheet, give them both the drop shadow, place my symbols on them accordingly. So this, just adding these additional symbols, these little frill symbols and swapping them to the buildings sheet. This lets me just make the buildings look a little bit less samey, because obviously they're all drawn using the same building tool, and as a result they can come out looking a little bit samey. Their shape changes, but otherwise they're still essentially the same thing, aren't they? I've just selected the building as well there, but that doesn't matter because that building's already on the building sheet. So I'm changing it to the same thing it's already on. No harm, no foul. So we've got a little bit extra frill on some of those buildings now. It's not on all of the buildings, but it's on some of them, and it just adds a little bit more detail and aesthetic pleasure. What I'd really like is, you see on this building over here, if I zoom in on it, that has been drawn with missing thatch, with a hole in the roof. I'd love it if we had that graphic as a frill. Just the framework and the black space underneath that could be placed over the top of the thatch on a different building. That would look really cool. But we, alas, do not have that, or at least if we do have that, I haven't spotted it. So it's something that theoretically I could maybe make for myself with a little bit of editing. I could, for example, take that ruined building and just chop away everything around the outside and then resave it as a frill and bring that in as a new symbol. But that's an awful lot of work and effort that I'm not going to do. Funnily enough, I hadn't noticed before, I will confess, that most of this stuff, a lot of this stuff anyway, is varicolor. So the difference between a symbol and a varicolor symbol, as the name suggests, is that the basic symbols, all their colors are set in advance. The varicolor symbols, however, they've basically got a shade palette, essentially, that is then applied to whatever color you currently have selected. So currently I've got this sort of orangey, brownish, orangey clay colored color selected. So any of these later symbols down here, these are varicolor symbols, and they come out with that color scheme on them. So that again lets you get a little bit more versatility. So for example, if you want to place, we've got a number of building tiles here. We can place these building tiles. We've got a few of them. We can chop and change between them. We can rotate them around. And then for good measure, if we really want to make them look less samey, but also use the bitmap tiles rather than the building creation tool, we can start using the varicolor and just slightly varying the color on each of them. So fun stuff like that. And the other thing that I thought I would show is I do want, in fact, I don't want the water to be quite this even. What I've done is at the beginning of the map, I drew in where the lake shore was. But now I'm going to come back to the default smooth water. And I'm just going to draw in from just out inside the lake. And I'm just going to effectively cut out a bit of the coast as water, and then when I redraw, it matches the water up. Now you could see before I applied the effect, before I redrew and the effects applied, that was nice blue water, and now it's got this greeny thing. That's all down to the sheet effects on this particular map. But I can do stuff like this. And I can also use, we've got a fractal water thing here. Now what that is, that's designed for essentially pools. So if I come over here and demonstrate this, I click and move out, and what that does is that determines the size of this like fractal circle. That generates me a fractal circle, and I can place that, and every time I place one of these, it then re-randomizes. The fractal gives me a new shape. And I can do several of these if I want to. I can even overlap one with the existing bits of water. And then again, when I redraw, those water effects will come up onto that. And now we've got these odd, weird little stagnant pools lying around. I may place a few more of them in other parts of the map. I haven't decided yet. But there we go. That's the start of my map for Saturday. I've got enough that theoretically I can export this before the session on Saturday and use it as it is. But obviously we know I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep working on this. However, I'm going to keep working on this off stream, having done a Mappa Monday for today. I really wanted to get a Mappa Monday done. And now I'm going to go off and do something else for a little bit and then come back to this map possibly later on. But for now, I am done with my stream, so thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll get another Mappa Monday in next Monday. Also, we missed our actual play. First Tuesday of the month should be an actual play, but for reasons that did not yet happen this month. So that is scheduled now. That's being re-shown on a Sunday. We're streaming that. The 26th, I believe, is the date. But either way, that will go onto YouTube afterwards, so you can always watch it on there. And if you haven't watched our actual play yet, we've got a couple of episodes on YouTube already on the Leashing Barguests, on the Fish Not Fish YouTube channel, because Leashing Barguests does not have its own YouTube channel. It's just my channel. So feel free to check that out if you've watched this and like the look of what we're doing. So that will do me for now. Until next time. May your dice be hot and your characters cool.